Have you ever wondered why we have such a long period between the election of the president and the inauguration, and just why that is? Well, I have too, and that's why I made this video. So here in the United States, we hold our presidential and congressional elections on the first Tuesday after the first Monday of November. This practice dates to 1845 when Congress passed a law to make it that way. And why, you may ask? Well, before this point, states were allowed to hold elections at their own discretion during a 34-day period, so long as it was before the first Wednesday of December. Now this system had some problems, as it meant that the results of the states that voted earlier in this 34-day period could have a huge impact on how voters would vote in later elections. So for obvious reasons, Congress decided we need one set day to vote as a country. Now, it kind of reminds me personally of the way we do the primary system nowadays, where one state votes one at a time or in a big group, and there's no real set coordination that all the states should have to vote at once. And knowing the primary system and how winning and doing well early on in that can very much so affect candidates going into the rest of the race and determining how other states vote, it makes sense as to why Congress might want to change that. Now the question becomes, what day will work best as an election day? It is important to remember that most Americans were still rural farmers, and most of them would need to travel, typically about a day. Now Tuesday ended up working best as they could travel Monday, vote Tuesday, go home, and be back by Wednesday for market day. November worked well because it didn't interfere with the harvest, and people wouldn't have to try and get out to vote during the winter months. So then comes the other question. Why did we have such a long period between election and inauguration? We today hold our election in November and inaugurate our president on January 20th. But the first presidential inauguration was April 30th, 1789, and every subsequent inauguration took place on March 4th. And this would be the system up until 1937. At this point, it took much longer to count returns and report them, so it's meant to allow for ample time to get everything settled, all the returns in, and to allow people to travel into DC to then meet with the Electoral College and vote. The other reason that we had this long lame duck period was so that a president could take that time to set up his cabinet, get affairs in order, and generally just prepare to take on the duties of the president. Now, this lame duck period also had many issues as well. The best example comes after the election of 1860, in which Abraham Lincoln won after a four-way contest and was elected president. Now, Lincoln's election pissed off the South, who at the time were reliant on the institution of slavery, and they were afraid that Lincoln would end the practice. Southerners also wanted to expand slavery, which Lincoln was opposed to, and he wanted to contain the institution within the South so that it would die out. Southern states started seceding a little bit after the election, the first state being South Carolina in December of 1860. Now, the president at the time, James Buchanan, who was a dough-face and had quite a bit of sympathy towards the South, and would end up blaming Lincoln for the Civil War, said that secession was illegal and unconstitutional, but he also said that he did not have the power to do anything about it, which doesn't really make sense, because if you think something is illegal, then you should also think that you would have the power to stop it. Now, this ended up leading to the country falling apart during this lame duck period, with several states seceding, and Lincoln had to just sit there and kind of watch. He couldn't do anything about it. Now, the country would continue to use March 4th as the day for the inauguration of both the president and Congress. Now, for Congress, you really didn't get to take your seat until Congress met in December of that next year, so Congress really didn't get to do anything. And then Congress got to legislate a lot through that lame duck period. Now, one senator, George Norris from Nebraska, attempted to try and change this. He introduced the 20th Amendment, which would have moved the inauguration of Congress from March 4th to January 3rd, and the inauguration of the president from March 4th to January 20th, what we have today. Now, this failed several times before it eventually passed in 1932 in both the House and the Senate, but it wouldn't be ratified until January of 1933, meaning that it wouldn't be in place for the inauguration of President Franklin Roosevelt for his first term. So by his second term in 1937, we now had the January 20th inauguration that we know today. And that's the end of the story. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe.